This one's from Front Page Tech. I've been watching this channel for a few years now, and it's really just tech news. Yeah, and in this particular episode, he's going to be talking about some Apple stuff, as well as some USB-C stuff. Let's check it out.
Okay. Anyone want to go check on Tim Cook and the gang?
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
All right, so jumping right into this, first up for the day, story numero uno. Remember how we've been sort of keeping an eye on Apple being forced to put USB-C on the iPhone? For like the last 10 years at various different times on this show, we have talked about the EU trying to pass into law a mandate that would force pretty much all handheld or portable devices that require a cable and a port to charge to make that cable and port that of the USB-C variety. And as you know, at least you should know, because we talked about this just a few episodes ago here on this show, the EU, they actually did it. USB-C will be the law of the land for most of the EU by fall of 2024 for every phone. And yes, that includes the iPhone. Yeah, well, apparently the US saw that and was like, you could do that? Now...
All right, so before he even continues, he's going to be talking about the fact that some U.S. senators, I believe, have proposed some type of legislation stating that, hey, maybe we should impose some type of law that then forces companies to use a particular port. Now, if I haven't done it now, I'll upload something later that'll pretty much be the same rant that I'm going to go on now. But it's important for regulators to get involved. And there has to be some type of balance because you don't want them to be too specific, yet you don't want them to be too vague. Because if it's too specific, you get locked down into one particular thing, and anything outside of that is then wrong, and then therefore against the law, blah, 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 blah. But if it's too vague, then companies find ways to circumvent what the legislators were attempting to ratify, solidify, whatever. And now it's almost like nothing even happened. So the European Union looks like they're mandating that devices that have any type of charging port need to be USB-C by 2024, I believe. And before we even talk about US stuff, because everything will be directly applicable to that, you don't want to be too specific. Because I was just looking up when USB-C was released. And I mean, shoot, I've had a phone with USB-C on it since 2015 or 16. So they're talking about, it looks like it was designed back in 2014. And let's see, it looks like in July of 2016, it was adopted by the IEC. Okay, now, yeah, honestly, none of this even really matters because we're talking by the time that it's mandated, a 9 or 10-year-old port. Okay. Although that might seem like a good idea because, as we know, USB-C is still continuing to evolve. I was listening to a Vergecast podcast months ago, and they did a really good job of explaining, the different USB naming structures now of USB 3 and 3.1 and 3.2, but then how it changed to 3.1, 1 by 1 or 2 by 2 and so forth and so forth. But what he explicitly said, again, it wasn't me assuming, he explicitly said that USB 2 was not, you would not find USB-C ports that were USB 2.0, which was completely false. And I meant to tweet, later, but I didn't care. But the whole point of me bringing it up is that, yes, the standard continues to evolve as early as being a USB 2.0 port through all of the USB 3 naming conventions, now to USB 4. And I'm sure it's possible to get even more speeds out of it. At some point, it'll be redesignated as USB 5. But in order for us to progress to a new port, which is then going to happen at some point, you would then have to break the law, it sounds like, if the port explicitly right now has to be USB-C. So even though initially, yes, I'd be in favor of The iPhone, because that's all we're really talking about here. The iPhone, nothing else really. I mean, you might have some older devices, or um, there are some companies who continue to use micro USB, um, because for them, it's more is it really is about a cost thing. Usually, like, hey, it costs money to redesign a port for a specific port. So going from mini USB to micro and then micro to USB C, definitely, um, it costs money, and Apple can afford it, but they don't want to. So I'm in favor of it, but at the same time, I feel like there were other pressing issues that could be addressed if we're just talking solely about the iPhone. Like, personally, I think it'd be a much better experience if the iPhone adopted RCS. Not going to talk about that. If you care about what RCS is, go look it up. But from a software or hardware standpoint, I already have lightning cables. So yeah, it sucks that I have two cables plugged into the little charger next to my bed, a USB-C one for all of my devices, not including the iPhone, and then I have one for the iPhone, and that's it. And I'm okay with that because I already own them. Whereas with RCS, it would just drastically improve the experience of the phone. And I feel that that would be more of a pressing thing. And I know these regulators are attempting to do something with open messaging systems. And I still don't think they should say, hey, you need to open your system. It should be, hey, continue using your proprietary things. However, here is a universal thing that you all need to adopt. That would make more sense to me, but we'll see what happens. But let's get back to the video.
The U.S., the United States of America, Apple's very own home, is like, yo, yeah, let's do that. Man, these hoes ain't loyal. That's right, a USB-C iPhone could soon be mandatory here in the U.S., as a group of senators is now calling on the U.S. Commerce Department to also mandate which hole we all have to use, citing a lack of interoperability standards for charging and other device accessories. And listen to this. This is the best part. The letter was signed by Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders. Ed is 75 years old, Elizabeth is 72, and Bernie Sanders is literally 80. These people.
So yeah, he's definitely going to go on and rag on their ages. And I definitely agree that these folks are pretty old. And I guess there are good reasons as to why old people all vote because they know voting is very important, and they know that change can happen if you do vote. And the majority of our governing bodies are probably all our senior citizens. Yeah, I'm not going to try to guess as to how many, but if we're looking at the Senate and the House of Representatives and the freaking president and the vice. Like, this isn't a political statement. Just they're all old, and whichever side they're on, a lot of them are old. And I just I do care some, but I feel like their age is also uh impacting their judgment, not being senile or anything, but just the focus that they're putting on one company for one port. Yes, as I just explained, it sucks that I have two cables next to my bed and one is explicitly for one device, but the core concept of being forced into one particular port, in my opinion, younger me, and I'm only 33, younger me still would be like, oh yeah, that would have been cool. Now I'm just like, I don't know. And again, it's because everybody who has an iPhone already has a lightning cable. So even though, yeah, it sucks that you have multiple cables, if you already have an iPhone, then it doesn't really matter. Now, as I think more and I'm watching, my tech YouTubers who we probably have multitudes of devices. So just right now, as I'm looking in my room, my phone that I'm recording this on is a Samsung Galaxy S22. The laptop that it's resting on, so I just have it on a hard surface instead of my bed, is a Lenovo ThinkPad. Right next to me is a Microsoft Surface Duo. Next to that is an Xperia 5 Mark III. Over there, I have another ThinkPad, another S22 Plus, my Sony headphones, and I have some other devices. But the point of me naming them all is that they all charge via USB-C. And then right next to me also, the one thing that I purposely skipped over is my iPhone, and it charges via Lightning. But at this point, I'm okay with that because, again, Apple provides the cable for you to charge. And they'll cite, oh, environmental waste and incompatibility. What are you plugging your iPhone into? You know, like, yeah, you have to plug it in to charge it. But in terms of being compatible with other things, if the company is providing the charging mechanism, it doesn't really matter. Now, I will say what kind of sucked was if you purchased, I think, an iPhone 11, I think it was the 11 series, where they had adopted, well, they had continued using Lightning on one end of the cable, but USB-C on the other, but then stopped including the brick in the box. I think that was 11. It might have been the 12. I forget which one. But one of them, you're like, oh, crap. I have the cable, but I don't have a charging brick that has a USB-C port on it. So, yeah, that kind of sucked. But, and that's honestly not Lightning. That's just, all right, you want us to use USB-C? Here it is. We're going to move away from USB-A, not get away from Lightning. So they kind of did a little switcheroo right there. But yeah, all of this little section say, yeah, I feel these people are being a little too narrowly sighted or narrowly focused on one particular company with one particular port. And as long as they continue providing a cable, then I really don't care too much. And John's going to go into, John Prosser is the host of the show. He's going to go into it that if they switch if they make it so that you have to use USB-C or that Apple has to use USB-C, because again, let's be honest, that's the only company we really care about when it comes to this conversation. The iPhone has to change. Yes. The AirPod case has to change. The Magic Mouse, the Magic trackpad, the Magic keyboard, trackboard, the Magic trackpad, and the Magic keyboard all have to change. The Apple TV remote has to change. Is there anything else? I think that's it in terms of their devices that currently use a Lightning port, and that's a lot for the company to say, hey, you have to all do this. And again, as long as the company is providing the cable in the box, at this point, does it really matter? If we were worried about transfer speeds, let's say, because if we were still constantly plugging things into computers and we needed the fastest, most reliable connection between, point A and point B, a phone and a computer and something else, and Apple was still using Lightning and Lightning was stuck at USB 2.0, I'd say, okay, that kind of sucks. And for those people who do plug their phones in and are transferring information off of their iPhone to a computer, yeah, I'm sure it sucks. But that's not the majority of people. I will confidently say the majority of people stopped plugging their iPhones into a computer a long time ago. And even if we're worried about compatibility and even though I don't think John just said it right there, somewhere along the lines is environmental waste or e-waste. If they switch to USB-C, then that's a whole bunch of people who currently have Lightning cables that are going to have to throw those away if they get a new phone. So that's adding to the waste. Then, I will say it's a stretch, but I feel like it's true. Every time you plug your cable into your phone, there is a little bit of wear and tear on that particular cable. So right now, if you have multiple cables and one cable is explicitly for one device, then at least your USB-C cable isn't getting as much wear and tear on it. So if you then think the idea of consolidating ports to just a single port means you will then consolidate the number of cables you're using down to just a single cable, then I'd say inevitably that cable itself is going to wear more quickly, which would then lead you to having to throw that cable away to then buy another one. So at the end of the day, I think they're trying to do what consumers want, but if you're fully, engulfed into the Apple ecosystem, I don't really think it affects them. And then if you're one of these people like myself, who's kind of a hybrid user, who I have an Apple product, along with a bunch of other Android and just non-cell phone products that charge via USB-C, it is kind of a hassle, but I'm used to it, and I feel the majority of us are used to it as well. So yeah, I guess I applaud their efforts and it sounded like the iPhone was going to USB-C for the iPhone 15 in 2023 anyway. But yeah, interesting stuff. Very, very interesting stuff. And I left out Beats in terms of things with USB, with Lightning or USB-C. I don't know. I don't really buy their products. I know some of them have USB-C, and some of them probably still charge via Lightning. In terms of new releases, I don't know. But again, if they do charge via Lightning, that's just something else that they're going to have to switch over to USB-C. So for the masses of the country, yes, switching over. But if you look at the subset of people who are Apple users, then you're doing them a disservice. It's, yeah, again, I'm kind of shrugging. Like, we'll see what happens.
People have one foot out the door, bro. Do any of them even know how to turn on an iPhone? Listen, do I want an iPhone with USB-C on it? Yes, okay, yes, of course I do. But I don't think that Apple should be forced to put it on there. Like, it's such a silly thing. A mandate of what hole we all get to use? Come on. And the people starting this definitely didn't copy the EU's homework revolution, are probably all on their fourth hip. New rule, okay? If you can get 15% off at Denny's, you don't get to tell me which charger to use. I do not think that this is going to make it all the way into law, but I also thought the same thing about the EU trying to do it, and here we are. For what it's worth, we're hearing that Apple is in fact going USB-C next year for iPhone 15 anyway, but keep in mind, this will affect all of Apple's products and products from every other company. So I sure hope you like USB-C for a while. Now, while you wait for that USB-C iPhone to finally come out, I could probably get you a free iPhone that has a lightning port on it. Let me tell you why. If I said, hey, insert your name here, you want a free iPhone 13 Pro? You wouldn't say no. Today's episode is sponsored by Versus.com, a comparison platform that offers user-friendly comparisons across a bunch of different categories. And they're now on YouTube. They're so sure that you're going to love their content that they're giving away an iPhone 13 Pro, a Galaxy S22 Ultra, and even a Pixel 6 Pro. Just click the link down in the description to get started and secure your chance to win. And of course, a huge thanks to Versus for sponsoring this episode of Puppeteer.
And full disclosure, that sponsor was for Front Page Tech, not for this channel. Front Page Tech received whatever funds for that sponsorship, not this channel.
All right, so last story, last up for the day. If you missed it, the pre-orders for the M2 MacBook Pro, those happened yesterday. And it was a disaster. First of all, they only made a solid 4 of these things, and the only ones you could really get were the base model configurations. Anything custom.
And I'll just cut him off right there and let him finish in a few moments. But all he's going to talk about really, and I agree, is who's buying this computer. So last year, or not, a year and a half ago now, you have the in 2020. In fact, I'll start at the beginning of 2020, where Apple released some Intel Macs, and they did away with the butterfly keyboard. So you're now able to buy Intel Macs with the Magic Keyboard. And yeah, performance for what a Mac is still cool, whatever. And then you're now rid of that butterfly keyboard, which caused people plenty of problems. So much so that, I think they've attempted to redesign it like 2 or 3 times, and it was still trash. And I think class action lawsuits were announced. And then Apple proactively, while still being reactive, announced a keyboard repair program for any laptops bought, like from that point forward. So even if you could have potentially been buying a new Mac, like you would go into the store and the Mac you would walk out with already had, I'd call it it's a repair program. I don't want to call it quite a recall, but essentially, yeah, they knew, hey, something's probably going to go wrong with that, or possibly will go wrong with that. So we'll go ahead and just make it known that if something does, you can come back. I don't know if there was a certain amount of time, but they knew there was a problem. So later in 2020, same design, but then they announced their M1 chip. So the Apple Silicon with their, super fast processor, unified memory, ultra fast storage, blah, 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 blah. Just really, really amazing computers. And at that time, they announced the M1 MacBook Air, the M1 MacBook Pro, and the M1 Mac Mini. And the difference between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro essentially was a slightly thicker design for the Pro, and the Pro had active cooling, so it had a fan in it. Also the touch bar. The Pro had the touch bar, which nobody really cares about, but apparently some people do. So I don't want to say that, but that was the main difference. And plenty of YouTubers showed that, well, you're able to get relatively the same amount of performance from the MacBook Air, very close, not quite, but even if you made a slight modification, putting some type of um, heat dissipating material over the whatever Apple currently has in there, could potentially dissipate some of the heat, and then you're able to possibly get almost the exact same performance as the MacBook Pro. So you're like, well, I pay $300 more for a fan, a larger battery, and a touch bar. Huh, interesting. So then fast forward to this year, 2022, Apple announces their M2 SoC, and in doing so, they announced the redesigned MacBook Air, which looks like a thinner, smaller version of the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. But then they also put that same M2 into the 13-inch MacBook Pro, but then they keep the exact same design. So now we're looking at a newly redesigned MacBook Air, and then a not redesigned 13-inch MacBook Pro. And also, they raised the price of the MacBook Air to $1,200 now from $1,000, but the price of the MacBook Pro stayed the same. So in terms of who's buying the MacBook Pro, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, apparently somebody is. Is it worth it? It's hard to say, given now that the price of the MacBook Air is so much closer. It's a $100 difference as opposed to a $300 difference. But yeah, if I were to be in the market for one of these products, I probably would hold off and get the MacBook Air, even though pre-orders haven't started yet. Yeah, it's $100 savings, but hey, you get a new design. I don't know if the screen is the same screen that's on the MacBook Pro. Maybe John will talk about that. But it's for a newer machine, potentially with some other perks. MagSafe. I know some people want a MagSafe. Yeah, and just something newer. You know, why order the older version or the older body, the 13-inch MacBook Pro that has the older body, as opposed to just getting the MacBook Air? I don't know, but some people did. So let's see what else John has to say about it.
Or if you just looked at it wrong, those MacBooks were already delayed until August. I guess if you're lucky, you can get some of them by next month. But it's not good, boys. Who's buying this? Did you buy this? No. This machine makes 0 cents. None. Less than 1 cent. So, for the Super Bowl, right? The winning team, after they win the game, they put on t-shirts and hats that have the team logo on it and, like, Super Bowl champion across them. Did you ever wonder, like, how does the NFL know? Like, how did the NFL know that team was gonna win, and how did they know early enough to make those t-shirts and hats? Well, they don't, of course. The shirts and the hats are made for both teams, and the winner gets theirs when the game is over, and the merchandise from the losing team, well, that gets donated. It's actually kind of cool. It gets donated to people that need them, usually in countries where the NFL means jack shit. Anyway, so yeah, the M2 MacBook Pro, basically the unused Super Bowl MacBooks. And if these were hard to get, what does that mean for the upcoming M2 MacBook Air? Surely Apple made more of those, right? The MacBook Air is Apple's most popular MacBook usually. These things are gonna sell like crazy. And if only tens of people care about that M2 MacBook Pro and that thing's still sold out, it's still hard to get, it doesn't look good for all Airy. When the MacBook Air pre-orders open up, and I should have an exact date for you here soon, you better be waking up nice and early, butt crack of the morning. If you want one of these things, you better have your monies ready, you better have that pre-order done within the first, 2 minutes, or else you're gonna be in trouble, and even then, you might only be able to get yourself a base model, like one of the base model configurations. Let me know down in the comments, are you waiting for that M2 MacBook Air? Don't worry, I'll give you time to type.
All right, and that was the end of the video. Yeah, so I'm not looking to buy one right now in particular, and in fact, I've owned I owned an M1 MacBook Air briefly. I bought it, then I ended up returning it, and then I had a Mac Mini with the M1 SoC on it, and I really like that machine, but I found myself not really using it too much. Plus, I didn't like having to sit at the computer at the desk because it was a desktop all the time. But I mean, I will say, and even as I look at stuff on eBay now, there's going to be a used market for this stuff. People will buy it, and then for whatever reason they won't like it. I know some people are probably going to try to flip it, but then depending on which online platform you're using, the the fees associated with selling on those particular platforms might negate whatever type of profit you thought you were going to make. So yeah, just be patient. The world's going through a lot of stuff right now, and if you want one, yeah, that's all I can say is be patient. So all in all, the two main things that he brought up in this particular one, USB-C on the iPhone, yeah, don't really think it's that important anymore, but we'll see what actually happens. And 13-inch MacBook Pros, apparently somebody wants them. So yeah, those are my thoughts on these particular things, and I thoroughly enjoy Front Page Tech and how John brings comedy to a lot of these a lot of these tech stories.